There's a lot of interest in the people coming from space, you know.
Yes.
And I know you're interested in that.
Oh, I'm very interested in that. How much did they tell you about that?
A lot.
Really?
Yeah.
One of the things that you said was that if they showed you what they showed me, this was your quote, you wouldn't want people to know it either.
So,
how much of it did you read into?
Donald Trump has just done a 3-hour podcast with Joe Rogan after having been refused on the show on multiple occasions. He talks about the election, the media targeting him, and even about aliens. In this video, I'm going to use my skills as a body language analyst to provide my insight into this fascinating episode of the Joe Rogan podcast.
I think...
You know, it's funny, you need at least the attitude of a comedian when you're doing this business. This is a very dangerous business, first of all. It's a very tough business.
It's the most dangerous business.
It's the most, well, for a job?
Yes. I mean, other than going to war and being a firefighter or being a cop, it's the most dangerous business.
It's the most dangerous. Being president is the most dangerous.
Especially you. I mean, you haven't even got to the election. There's been 2 assassination attempts. And they've brushed those out of the news like it was nothing.
Yeah, they'd rather not talk about them.
Imagine if there was assassination attempts on Biden, how hard people would be attacking the right, how they would be trying to get guns taken away from people. They would try to ramp up gun laws. They would try to figure out some way to blame you. If there was attacks on, if Biden got shot in the ear, we would have never heard the end of it.
But I think he's in good shape because it's only consequential presidency.
So Trump does something interesting here. He distances when Joe starts speaking about the assassination attempt, avoiding making eye contact. Distancing behaviors occur when the brain encounters a stressor and tries to divert its attention away to reduce its physiological arousal. Speaking about the attempt on his life causes him stress. Trump is a very controlled and unemotional appearing person, often hiding and masking his true feelings to maintain this calm outward demeanor. But from this, we can see that this does get to him. The assassination attempt affects him deeply, and it's why he gives off this reaction. And then he tries to change the topic of the conversation.
If you take a look at what's happened, look, I'm for having countries pay us billions and billions and trillions even dollars. I took in hundreds of billions of dollars from China. Nobody took in 10 cents, not one other president. I do things that make it, that don't necessarily make me so popular. I just do what's right. And when you do that, you know, you're more, look at Iran. We would have never had the attack on Israel at all. Iran was broke. I told China, if you buy, you can't do business in the United States under any circumstances. We're going to go cold turkey with China. Some people think that would have been a good idea anyway. But if you buy any oil, 1 barrel of oil from them, you're not doing business. And I said that to many countries. Iran was broke. They had no money for Hezbollah. They had no money for Hamas. They had no money. But I make myself, I understand what I'm doing. You make yourself a target. And it's a very dangerous business. But if you just look at statistically, so I saw a thing, I don't know if it's right, but 1/10% for a race car driver. Yeah, it's a pretty dangerous business, right?
Yeah.
1/10% for a bull rider. I tell you, to me,
you're talking death.
These guys that ride the bulls is worse than UFC. It's worse.
Yeah.
These guys, you see these big monster bulls, and you see it in slow motion where the foot is like, an inch away from the head. If it hits him, the guy's gone. But they die. They die.
So 1/10% die. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, 1/10% die.
Right.
And they certainly get hurt badly. Really, they can't walk after a certain period of time. But with a president, if you look at
the amount of assassination attempts.
And attempts, too.
Yeah.
And attempts. No, it's a very dangerous position. I never thought of that, by the way, when I did it. You don't tend to think.
Did you just assume because people loved you on The Apprentice, they were going to love you as a president?
I figured it would be so easy. It's
well,
very
it probably
interesting.
would have been if the media didn't attack you the way they did. If they didn't conflate you with Hitler. I mean, even today, like Kamala was talking about you and Hitler. They're going to take what you said about Robert E. Lee. Oh, Donald Trump wishes the South won.
That's right. He loves Robert E. Lee.
They love to take things out of context and distort things. But
they don't even have to take them out. They make them up entirely. Okay,
They do
make
that
'em-
too.
So Trump is making strong eye contact with Rogan here, and as a general rule, we make eye contact between 30 and 40% of the time when speaking, and 60 to 70% of the time when listening. Trump does substantially more than that here, around 80%, even when speaking, which is an incredibly assertive and dominant behavior. High eye contact levels are heavily linked with aggression and confidence, and from what I've seen, Trump does this constantly. He's been a successful businessman for the majority of his life, and has had to fight in 3 polarizing election campaigns, so it's likely he's adapted over his entire life to be more assertive and dominant in his behavior.
But it's interesting when you mentioned I was very popular, and all those people loved me. I mean, some of these women, they're so stupid, and Joy, she would every time she'd see me, I'd be in the theater or something, and she's, you have to be on the show again. Come on, let's go.
She loved you.
She loved me.
That episode where
By the way,
people
Whoopi-
should watch that episode just to see what we're talking about. Like I said, we don't want to get a copyright strike, so we're not going to put it up. But
It's okay.
if you watch the episode, it's bananas. It's like an alternative universe, and it's only
But Whoopi
9
loved
years
me.
ago.
Whoopi loved me.
You, gives you a hug and a kiss.
And how about that other one, the new one on there, the one from my administration? She writes me a letter. You're the greatest president. She leaves. She worked as an assistant press secretary. I hardly knew her. But she leaves and she writes me this gorgeous letter. What's her name? She was, I don't even know. Anyway, she was in the administration. She's on now currently. Sits on the far right-hand side, whatever the hell her name is. And she writes a letter, the most beautiful letter. She's quoted in the paper. He was the greatest president, blah, blah, blah. Then all of a sudden she goes to the View and she started hitting the hell out of me. Because they won't hire her unless. I've had many people go on CNN and they call and said, I don't know what to do. They want to pay me a lot, but I have to be negative on you. I said, be negative. That's okay. There are guys on like CNN, they won't hire them. Sean Duffy is a congressman, and he retired. He got a good job with CNN, but he was only positive about Trump. So they kept him, but they would never put him on. I mean, I respect what he did. He could have gone, negative. I tell people, go negative. Let my friends make the money.
Well,
it's just so crooked. The press is so crooked.
It's crooked, but it's also they're diminishing themselves. They're
hurting themselves.
They're killing all their credibility, and it's opening up the credibility to new media. It's opening up the credibility to independent media. All these.
The worst I've ever seen, though. And I've seen the worst. I mean, I've been a part of it. I've seen the worst.
I absolutely love spinny chairs, as they provide a massive insight into someone's thoughts and feelings, as they allow the legs to move freely whilst otherwise they would have been restrained. Trump swivels back and forward here, whilst also clasping his hands over each other. Rogan, on the other hand, is leaning as far forward as possible in his chair, with his legs wide apart. Trump is extremely eager to speak, and the swinging we see is a result of the excess stress levels venting through his legs. He's eager to speak, but has to let Joe speak, which generates an urge to vent. In the same way we pace around the room when on a phone call. Our body needs a release, as sitting down and being civil creates a feeling of constraint. And Trump is very much used to being the one in control of the conversation. The hands clasped over each other is another way the brain tries to calm us down, and research shows that self-touch directly leads to a reduction in cortisol levels in the bloodstream, which is a stress hormone. Trump and Rogan do this here, both for very different reasons. Trump because he can't speak, and Rogan because he's doing possibly the most important podcast of his life.
Kamala goes on 60 Minutes, gave an answer that a child wouldn't give. It was so bad. And 60 Minutes took the answer out. They took the whole, and they put another answer in.
They edited it deceptively.
Which didn't make sense either, but it was better. They took it wasn't editing. It was fraud. This was not editing. Editing is where I'll give an answer and they'll take a couple of words and change them around, or they might even take a sentence or two off, which is very bad. But it's sort of bad. I'd give an answer which was a very good answer. I always talk about, I like to give the weave. I like to.
You like to weave things in.
But when you do the weaves, and you have to be very smart to do weaves. When you do the weave, look at this. Just in this one thing, we're talking about little pieces all over here, but it always ends up.
Home.
No, it comes back home. For the right people. For the wrong people, it doesn't come back home, and they end up in the wilderness, right? but they can take my answer, and you know what? They may take a little piece of it out or something, and they use the term, "Yes, we wanted to save time." Well, it's not. But I've never heard. I think it's the biggest scandal in broadcast history, what happened to CBS. So you have CBS 60 Minutes. That's a news program. It's not an entertainment program. It's under their news. It's the head of their news thing. She gives an answer that shows that she's essentially incompetent. And they took the answer. Could you imagine them doing that for
We can
me?
show it if you want people to see it. Can we
Go
show
ahead.
it? No?
Sure.
We get in trouble? We'll get copyright strike? Okay.
I'll
Listen, anyone
I'll
can find
indemnify
it,
you.
but it's drastic. But what was interesting was the other full version was available initially. It was like a preview.
Somebody made a big mistake.
Somebody put that preview out
Some
there.
kid
and
put
then,
the preview out.
Exactly.
And then the bosses did this or that. And then all of a sudden they
Exactly.
said, we got a problem.
Exactly. And then
They
it
got caught
became-
by mistake.
Well,
But don't you think that's a big, to me, and don't forget, this is election interference and fraud.
So I did some digging on this Kamala interview, and yeah, they cut around 25 seconds out of the interview, where she appears very incoherent and doesn't provide a clear answer to the question. In my personal opinion, political interviews should always be uncut so that the public can make up their own minds. How a politician copes with and responds to difficult questions is probably the most important and effective way the public can judge them. Do not underestimate the power of body language in deciding an election. Trump appears calm and controlled because he knows that will win him votes. Kamala just doesn't have that same level of control. She allows her emotion to impact her nonverbals, and it just makes her appear more impulsive and less coherent.
And it's 60 Minutes. It's their news division. So
it's a big deal.
They give those licenses out, Joe, for free. They should pay a fortune. They're worth a fortune. They give them out for free because they're using the public airwaves. With cable, you don't have that. Cable's different. But, you know, it's just a different deal. But with the networks, they give those licenses. They're worth billions of dollars. They give them out free, but you have to be honest and all. That was bad. I think that David Muir and that woman that was aside, I never even heard of her, but they kept interrupting me. It was like, I said, how many people am I debating here? I got this one and I got you two. But he went after me 11 different times. You know, it's interesting. I always thought he was a nice guy, but he's just like the rest of them, you know?
Well, that's his job, unfortunately, and I'm
No,
sure
but not when they're
what they
wrong.
want. You're right. Well, the problem was they fact-checked you and they didn't fact-check her. And
Not
one of
at
the most
all.
egregious examples of that was when she said that there are no troops right now deployed in
Yeah.
war zones.
Yeah.
There's a very famous viral video that went online of troops in a war zone saying, "Well, what the fuck are we then?" Because there's thousands of them. Dan Crenshaw, the congressman, posted on his Instagram all of the various examples of
Too many.
troops that are deployed, thousands and thousands of troops that are currently deployed.
Stupidly deployed.
But the point is, if this is going to be an actual real debate and not a propaganda exercise, if it's going to be a real debate, you have to fact check everybody.
So
Like if
they-
someone
they
says
never went
maybe she
after-
thought there was no,
Right.
which is also a problem. So it's one of two things. It's either it was not true, it was a lie on purpose, which is terrible, or it was the opposite. It was ignorance, which is also terrible.
Well, Joe, when I said crime is soaring, he said, no, crime has gone down. I said, where did you hear that one? Crime has gone down. I mean, I'm debating with this guy, but I've had that.
Well, there was amended FBI statistics that came out after that
Yeah.
showed that crime had gone up substantially.
And by the way, the statistics were a fraud because when they put out the statistics, they didn't include some of the worst places. They didn't include some of the worst cities, some of the most deadly places. But
And
when
then
the
there's
real
also a
numbers came out,
problem-
I turned out to be right. But I haven't gotten...
You turn out to be right, but then there's another problem. Unreported crime is way up because people have lost. Look, the morale that the police department has in a lot of these cities where they've done this defund the police bullshit.
Right.
The morale of these
It
poor
is.
cops, it's fucking horrible.
Trump continues his strong eye contact, as well as gesturing with his hands. In body language, we establish someone's baseline behaviors, which allows us to then identify when those behaviors change. This then signals that something has caused their baseline to become interrupted, which allows us to analyze why. Out of almost everyone I've ever reacted to, Trump has likely the most consistent baseline out of anyone. His behaviors have remained incredibly similar, and I think that's because he has years and years of media training. He's been in this game a very long time, to a point where he knows exactly how to control his behaviors and minimize the impact of stress on his nonverbals. If you look at his hand movements, they are entirely consistent regardless of what he's talking about, and it's become iconic at this point.
I think I had a great relationship with the military, basically, but I didn't like certain people. I would have gotten them out if I thought if the election was different, I would have fired all of them quickly. Most of them I did fire. Biden should have fired every military person involved with Afghanistan. He should have had a lot of firings. You know, if you look at him, he told Israel not to do anything, and at least Israel's not going to look at a bomb the way they would have been. Think if they listened to Biden. They'd be waiting for a bomb to drop on their head right now. He's been wrong about so much. I guess you'd have to say that she's been wrong, too, because, you know, she always said they made the decision together. But Israel didn't follow his advice. And I think it was a very, the Middle East is rapidly changing. You know, there are prophets that say the world will come to an end in the Middle East. You know that, right? And we have weapons today that are so scary. When you look, I rebuilt them all. And when you look at the weapons we have today, the biggest threat we have in the world today is nuclear weapons. And we have other weapons, too, that are devastating. But the nuclear weapons, the biggest threat we have in the world today, and that's what I was talking about de-escalation with both China and Russia. I'm telling you, we were going to de-escalate. They were going to de-escalate. You got to be careful. It's a little tricky playing with them because they say we're going to do it and they don't do it, maybe. But they understood the curse, too. It's a curse. It's China's way behind us, but they'll catch us within 5 years.
Although Trump rarely deviates from his baseline, making strong eye contact and gesturing freely, he does deviate from it quite dramatically here when talking about nuclear weapons. He keeps diverting his eye contact to the floor and dramatically reduces the amount of eye contact he's making with Rogan. This is because he's under cognitive load. When we're in deep thought, it's common to experience elevated cognitive load, which results in a lack of eye contact, as the brain diverts its attention from maintaining social contact to processing whatever it is you're thinking about. This shows that Trump is being deeply careful about how he approaches the issue of nuclear weapons, and that it is a grave concern for him.
So let's imagine, let's say you win in November. What do you do differently, and how do you change this course that it seems we are on for World War III? How do you get us out of Ukraine? How do you stop what's going on in the Middle East? How do you put a stop to this?
Well, it's a very to me, it's an easy question because I think I can do it easily, but it's a complex question in the sense that the times change. Every day changes. Who's winning, who's not winning? I mean, Russia's a war machine. Whether you like it or not, it just grinds along. You speak to people like Viktor Orban, he'll tell you it's just a big, fat war machine, and that's what's happening. You look at what's happened to Ukraine. If I were there, it would have never happened.
But what could you do now? If you get into office in January, what could you do now?
Right now, you would get both of them. I know both very well. And again, I do not want to tell you, for the purpose of looking smart to 5 people that say, oh, he was great. Because if I told you exactly what I do, I could never make the deal. All I can tell you is that I would meet with Putin and I would meet with him, and I know exactly what I'd say to each one of them. And I believe that as president-elect, I would get that war stopped, and stopped fast. We have tremendous power in the United States if you know how to use the power. I stopped other wars just by the use of tariffs. I got Macron of France. Good guy, like a friend of mine, but he's a wise guy, and he's a person that likes France, and he was going to tax our companies. I sent all the smartest guys. I sent Mnuchin, and they all failed me. And I said, I'll do it myself. And I called him. I said, Emmanuel, you're taxing American companies. We're not going to allow you to do that. Oh, Donald, I cannot do it. Nothing I can do. It's already been passed. I said, Emmanuel, if you do that, I'm going to put 100% tariff on your wines and champagnes that come into the United States, and you're going to regret that you ever did it. He said, Donald, please, that's not fair. Anyway, within about 2 minutes, he dropped the whole thing, and it was massive amounts of money against American companies. I have to protect American companies.
So why doesn't the Biden administration do this?
Because they're incompetent.
We hear Trump pacify by doing a long exhale when considering the topic of World War III and the use of nuclear weapons. Ekman and Friesen in 1979 published a study which found that a sigh or long deep breath is a method of stress relief that reduces someone's physiological arousal. By exhaling slowly, Trump is controlling and resetting his rapid breathing that's triggered by his elevated stress levels. When we get stressed, the defense mechanism increases our breathing rate to provide our muscles with the energy it needs to defend itself. What this shows is that Trump takes this issue extremely seriously.
They don't know how to talk. Look, they met in Alaska with the Chinese, and the Chinese lectured them about how badly we treat people. right? Okay? I mean, think of it. You remember that? It was like they didn't talk to me that way. They respected me. They respected our country. They don't respect our country. They don't respect Biden. They don't respect her. They're dreaming about her because she's incompetent. She's not a smart person. Look, she can't put two sentences together. She talks. I watched her 2 nights. I watched her last night, too. It was the same thing. She's not a smart person. These guys are very smart, and they're very streetwise, and they're very tricky and evil and dangerous. And if she becomes the President of the United States, which I can't believe can happen, I don't think this country is going to make it. I don't think we'll ever be. I think just really bad things will happen to our country.
After moving on from the possibility of war, Trump returns back to his baseline of strong eye contact and frequent hand gestures.
One of the things that I want to talk to you about is the JFK files. And one of the things that you said was that if they showed you what they showed me, this was your quote, you wouldn't want people to know it either.
So I opened them up partially. I was met from good people. I mean, good people. People that were well-meaning. Mike Pompeo was one of them. He's a good person. They called me. They said, "Sir, would rather have you not." And I did open them. But I was asked by some people not to open them. There's a Martin Luther King file, too, by the way, that they'd like to see. I don't know if you know, but there is that. But JFK in particular. So they called me, a lot of good people called me, people that that you would find reasonable people. And they asked me not to do it. So I said, well, we'll close it for another time. But if I win, I'm going to open them up. I'm just going to open enough time.
Why didn't you open it up the first time?
Because
though?
a lot of times,
what was the hesitation? Though?
Addresses, people that are still living. There are people that are affected, and there could be some national security reason that that I don't have to necessarily know about. But some very good, talented people asked me not to do it. I opened it up, and then they said, "Would it be possible for us to do that a different day?"
How much of it did you read into? I think it's going to be just fine to open it. Let me put it that way. I think it's fine. It's going to be time.
Both Trump and Rogan's body language shifts dramatically from their baselines here. Rogan begins to pacify by scratching his arms, which is an effect of the increased stress levels. But he also maintains eye contact with Trump, indicating that Trump isn't the stressor. Rogan is agitated that this information exists but is not made public, explaining this reaction. As for Trump, when asked about his comments on the JFK files, he distances to the floor and tenses his mouth. Both are indicators of a spike in stress levels. His tone of voice also changes to a more smoother, slower speech pattern, and he abruptly cuts out speaking, but only briefly, indicating cognitive load. He's being extremely cautious in his response, as well as experiencing a high degree of stress. He knows that he has to be cautious, meaning there is something in those files that, if made public, would trigger major consequences.
It's a cleansing, it's really a cleansing. So I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it immediately, almost immediately upon entering office.
Well, the thing, when people look at it from the outside and you sort of imagine what could be a reason why they would not release those files, it would be there's people that were implicated in the assassination.
Yeah. Well, when there are living people, you generally tend not to want to do it. When people are still living
people that formerly worked for the government.
And living people that were somehow involved in it, and you tend not to do that. But it's time to open them. I can't tell you whether or not they're going to find anything of interest. And I did partially open. I think I've opened 50%, but I was asked not to do it, and I thought that was a reasonable ask. But now I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it very soon. There's a lot of interest in it.
One of the things that
there's a lot of interest in the people coming from space,
Yes.
And I know you're interested in that.
Oh, I'm very interested in that. How much did they tell you about that?
A lot.
Really?
Yeah.
What did they tell you? How much can you tell?
So
how's that work? Is it like super
top
secret?
I can tell,
Tell me.
Well, based on Hunter Biden, I can say whatever the hell I want, right? But no. But I interviewed a few people. It's never been my thing, I have to be honest. I have never been a believer. I have people that Area 51 or whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's the #1 tourist attraction in the whole country or something. Area 51 in Las Vegas. Do you know that, right?
Sure. I know what it is.
So anyway, but it's a big tourist thing. So I interviewed jet pilots that say they saw something. If you saw them, you'd love to have them as your
I've had a
son.
couple in here. Commander David Fravor.
Yeah.
I had him in, who had that sighting in 2004. Very, very compelling with video
compelling.
evidence, radar evidence.
Ryan
Graves.
I don't believe his name, but I interviewed jet pilots that were solid people. Perfect. I mean, great pilots, great everything. And they said, we saw things, sir, that were very strange. Like a round ball, but it wasn't a comet or a meteor. It was something. And it was going 4 times faster than an F-22, which is a very fast plane, you know. And it was round, which is, in theory, a great shape.
So when you were talking to these people, was this something that you were compelled to have conversations about? Was this your personal interest?
A little bit. It's not a great interest for me, but it's a little interest. I get that question as much as almost any question. Do you think that we have aliens coming, you know, flying around or whatever?
What do you think?
We now see Trump do what's called the self-hug. He's got his arms folded over his torso and is doing self-touch, which is a method of stress regulation. Clearly something about this topic is generating him stress. And I think that's because he knows a lot more than he's allowed to tell. He claims not to have an interest in UFOs, and yet he took the time out of his busy presidential life to literally interview pilots who witnessed them. It's a fascinating revelation, actually.
There's no reason not to. I mean, there's no reason not to think that Mars and all these planets don't have life, you know, because
Mars, we've had probes there and rovers, and I don't think there's any life there.
Well, maybe it's life that we don't know about. Maybe
there was life there at one point in time. This is the speculation about Mars, that Mars had an atmosphere at one point in time, a long time ago, that could support life. It also had large bodies of water, but we've had no evidence of even bacterial life that exists on Mars. But the universe is pretty vast.
It's not been a big thing for me. I mean, when I looked at what China did to this, they would have never done it with me, where they put the balloon up, and a lot of people thought for a little while that was one of these things. So,
well, that's a lot of the speculation too, that some of these drones that hover over battleships, that these are Chinese drones, and that they're not UFOs.
They could be also.
There's some super sophisticated.
But I did interview, let's say 3 or 4 guys that, and without tremendous interest, if you had them. As I said, you'd love to have them as your children. Solid, beautiful people. They said, sir, there's something there. You know,
there's something there.
Said it, yeah.
Yeah, I've talked to quite a few of them.
They're not conspiracy guys.
Well, I mean, just the Commander David Fravor thing in 2004 off the coast of San Diego, they clocked that thing going from 50,000 feet above sea level to 50 in a second.
Yeah.
They don't know what it is.
That's tough to beat.
Yeah, they saw something in the water. It was hovering over that something that was making a disturbance in the water. They got video evidence of this thing. 2 different fighter jets with pilots in them saw it. There's, visual evidence, photographic evidence, video evidence, radar evidence. Whatever the hell it is, it moves in a way that would turn a human being into jello if they were inside of it. The G-force, no one would survive.
Oh,
so what is that? And it doesn't have a heat signature. They don't know what their propulsion system was. But
when you fly in some of these jets, these pilots have to be in great shape.
Oh, yeah. I flew with the Blue Angels once.
Yeah.
I got to fly. I guess it's an FA-18.
And those are older machines.
And they're crazy.
When you fly in some of these things,
oh my God,
it's amazing. Yeah, but
I can imagine.
You got to be special.
It's amazing to see the shift in Trump's behavior. When he's talking about politics, he makes strong eye contact with Rogan, gesturing with his hands, and also talking calmly in a way that's just so common for him. It's rehearsed, and he's talked like that for thousands of hours at rallies and in debates. However, when he's then pressed on the JFK files or on UFOs, he starts to reveal his more genuine side. His body language reads a lot more, and we see that deliberate persona fade away as he becomes more natural. It's fascinating. Thank you so much for watching this video, guys. If you did enjoy it, please be sure to hit the like button and subscribe for more content, and I'll see you in the next video. Goodbye.